What's the fairest card in Magic? There are your classics, like Tarmogoyf, which is just a big creature. People often call Burn the fairest deck, so perhaps it's Lightning Bolt. You could even argue that since Force of Will is so often the pressure release valve that keeps Eternal formats like Legacy from devolving into turn 1 combo fests, that maybe it's actually Force of Will. To me, though, the answer is simple. Balance. It's not just in the name, it's the entire name. It's a 1-card, 2-mana communist dream which cuts every blade of grass to the same exact level. And the best part is, there's absolutely no way to abuse it. So those of you who actually know what balance does could probably figure out any number of different ways to break it in the 3 seconds after I said that you couldn't. What balance does is it says everybody who has more than the lowest number of creatures sacrifices a difference. Everyone who has more than the minimum number of lands sacrifices a difference. And everybody who has more than the lowest number of cards in their hand discards the difference. That doesn't actually cover that much stuff. The big ones, artifacts, enchantments, and planeswalkers, but also any effects that you can use out of your graveyard, any spells that you can cast from exile or other zones. Again, whole bunch of stuff that balance just doesn't take into consideration. Balance is actually really, really easy to make unfair. My favorite kind of card to pair with balance are wildfire effects. The classic wildfire itself is 6 mana, deals 4 to each creature, each player sacks 4 lands. This serves a very similar purpose to balance in the decks that want it, where you're not only clearing the board of creatures which can actually threaten you, but you're also attacking your opponent's mana to prevent them from redeveloping quickly and allowing you to take over the game slowly. The best way to break these sorts of symmetrical effects revolve around the question of where you're getting your mana from, because ideally you want to have fewer lands than your opponent for the purposes of the balance differential, but also just because it means that you lose less to an effect like wildfire. The easiest answer is with artifact mana. Artifacts which tap for mana don't get destroyed by balance, don't get destroyed by wildfire, and they're very easy to play out quickly because you can chain them together in big turns where you just vomit your hand onto the table. Being able to dump your hand is really important for balance, obviously, but also for the kinds of cards that you want to pair with it, namely Ensnaring Bridge. Ensnaring Bridge is the other sort of key piece to this puzzle because, yes, being able to clear the board with your fast mana into wildfire or balance is powerful, but you don't want to wind up in a situation where your opponent sticks a creature and you're trying to draw into an answer. Ensnaring Bridge just stops you from being hit as soon as you're able to get your hand out. Ensnaring Bridge is actually one of the most important cards in a deck like this because of the way that it shuts down creature strategies so completely. So now I've got this sort of disruptive core. It begs a question of how I'm going to win the game, especially how am I going to win the game through Ensnaring Bridge? And the answer, surprisingly, is quite straightforward. I'm going to breach them. The main Underworld Breach combo that sees play in the format right now revolves around Lion's Eye Diamond and Brain Freeze. With Brain Freeze, you can mill yourself multiple times in order to get enough cards into your graveyard to escape Lion's Eye Diamond, which is Black Lotus with upside, and then escape the Brain Freeze itself. This allows you to burn through your own deck, but also your opponent's deck at the same time, eventually milling them out, ideally leaving yourself with some cards left in your deck just in case. It's very effective, very fast, and very easy to assemble. With just Intuition or Gifts Ungiven, you can find Underworld Breach, Lion's Eye Diamond, and Savine's Reclamation. Your opponent doesn't really have any good options with this package. As long as you have enough cards in your graveyard to get back Underworld Breach with Savine's Reclamation, you can start going off. The reason that it's so nice for this deck is that A, I'm not spending many points on my core cards, it's just the one on balance, so I can afford to invest the rest of the points into the kill package, and B, it's a 1-card kill. With a deck this slow, your opponents get a lot of opportunities to draw to their outs, and that can be really challenging to overcome. With the Intuition package and Gifts for Redundancy, you've got a couple of opportunities, even if they do start dealing with your lock, to just top deck a win on the spot. And especially with the amount of fast mana available to you, you can also just draw a hand with Intuition in it and just go off very early as turn 2 with some Mana Vault starts. Oh, Mana Vault's kind of the best mana rock in the game, so we're playing that. And so this leads to a really interesting core where not only do I not need to invest anything beyond really these about 6 cards to winning the game, I don't need creatures at all, and I don't really want them either. So I'm not playing any. The rest of the deck is around assembling this sort of artifacty lock with, again, Ensnaring Bridge, these types of effects. The Tezzerets are huge for this. The flexibility that they have in finding all of my pieces and untapping all my mana rocks, absolutely phenomenal. And that's where the deck gets its name. It's Tezzerator, an old extended deck which used the superior blue emo boy in Tezzeret the Seeker to find Ensnaring Bridge, control the game, and eventually lock your opponent out. But this time we're just winning with Breach. And it feels surprisingly good. The deck is quite consistent at finding Ensnaring Bridge. It's able to roth the board fairly consistently, and you just kind of win out of nowhere. Especially with some hands, your opponents will not expect the pace that you can generate. So I took it to my local weekly, and round 1 I was up against an Esper Control Reanimator deck. It was a fairly interesting matchup. I started with a quick Ensnaring Bridge, and I eventually drew into a Breach kill that took them completely by surprise. In game 2 though, my opponent hand attacked me, and then I drew both Underworld Breach and Brain Freeze. I decided to go for the turn 3 Fabricate to get LED instead of Ensnaring Bridge, but my opponent held up Celestial Purge to exile my Underworld Breach while Brain Freeze was on the stack. Game 3, I had a solid start, but I got greedy, cracking LED for no value with balance on the stack. I wanted to just mind twist my opponent, didn't have much in my hand that I cared about, but they had the Spell Snare to counter the balance after I'd already pitched my hand. So I was stuck with nothing, and eventually they managed to get a threat into play and take me out. Porphyry Nodes was the surprise all-star of that game. The card just came down on turn 2, got them to counter a trigger with a Consign to Memory, and then still ate 2 creatures. The card is just really, really effective when I don't have anything to feed to it. Round 2 was a bit of a nightmare matchup. Gruul Prowess. Part of the reason this deck is scary is because of its general pace. I'm very slow, and they can kill me as early as turn 2 with a really insane draw. The other reason is that even if the game goes longer, their creatures are all quite small, so if I'm not able to get all of the cards out of my hand, if I draw multiple lands, for instance, then they can attack me with a creature that's only got 1 or 2 power, and then juice it up with pump spells after the Ensnaring Bridge check. I did have some early interaction in game 1, but I just got beat down. I'm way too slow for the matchup. Game 2 went more in my way though. I got the early Ensnaring Bridge down, and eventually managed to top deck and treat the Angels for 5, putting 20 power into play. I was really worried because at this stage of the game, I was actually still quite low, and I know for a fact that they have Price of Progress in their deck. I could lose at any point. I used Buried Ruins to get an extra card into my hand by surprise and attack them for 20 since they were at 17, but they had Legolas's Quick Reflexes to give a creature reach and block. So I had to dump my hand again and hold back, waiting until I got a stock up, which was able to, again, surprise get my hand up to 4 cards and attack for lethal. Game 3, I had a Gifts Ungiven hand, and I was 1 turn off the kill, but Legolas's Quick Reflexes came down again to save their Heartfire hero from my Unable to Scream, which would have stopped it from getting 2 out of hand. Unfortunately, it was enough for them to untap and finish me off. Now, round 3, I went up against Orge of Taxes, which has got to be one of my worst matchups. This is a deck that can attack the mana base, that has a whole bunch of cheap creatures, and lots of interaction for my breach kill. I was very lucky in game 1. I kept a hand with LED and Intuition, and my opponent, given the opportunity on turn 3 to tap out to cast something, chose to go with Skyclave Apparition, exiling my Manifold Key. I end-step Intuitioned, untapped, and killed them. They had another 3-drop in their hand, which would have stopped me from killing them there. I got very, very lucky. Game 2, I boarded out the Breach combo entirely in favor of creatures which are easier to deploy, even though they don't win the game quite so immediately. Unfortunately, in this case, I kept a pretty non-functional hand because it had Ensnaring Bridge in it, and I just wasn't able to dump my cards fast enough. Game 3, I had an insane hand with Mana Vault into Karn Scion of Urza on turn 2, and 2 Mana Rocks to follow it up. I started down-ticking straight away and beat them down with tokens. They got up to, I think, about 6/6. Eventually, they did deal with them, but they were low, and to develop their board, they had to use their Silent Clearing to add mana. They pinged themselves down to 4, then to 3, and Lightning Bolt to the Dome, finished them off. Now, round 4 was... you can't really call it the mirror. Prison Shops is built on a lot of the same principles as my deck, where you're trying to generate card advantage by using these lock pieces to slow your opponent down in such a way that one card is holding multiple of your opponent's cards at bay at the same time, because it stops them from doing them all at once. Things like Ensnaring Bridge, Trinosphere, these types of things. In game 1, they just had nothing for the breach kill. A fast combo is a really tough matchup for Prison Shops. Game 2 was the Tezzeret mirror. We both got 3 mana Tezz out, and they stuck a couple of prison pieces, Trinosphere and Sphere of Resistance. Bioforce came in huge, blowing up all of their lock pieces and forcing them to use Battleship to blow up Tezz and prevent me from getting his ult off. Then I could end-step Intuition and win the game that way. All in all, the deck is super fun, and again, the fast mana makes it feel quite strong. This wasn't even the best version of the deck. I was missing some cards because I might not have paid 100% attention to the import tariffs, but now that I have them, I'm looking forward to trying out this deck some more. Definitely getting in more fast mana pieces like Grim Monolith, as well as lock pieces like Bottled Cloister, which is, a lot of people miss, is a one-sided Howling Mine, as well as the fact that it is a guaranteed lock with Ensnaring Bridge by exiling your entire hand on your opponent's turn. This also leaves you a bit freer to attack because you can keep a larger hand with Ensnaring Bridge in play. There is, of course, the risk that they blow up the Cloister with your hand in exile and then you just never get it back. That's rough, but the card's good, I swear. The other question is about Geddon effects. I really wanted to play Armageddon, but I found that the ability to clear away creatures was really important. But I'm hoping that with a bit of tinkering, I can find more ways to get land destruction into the deck, because that's one of the biggest strengths that it has. Being able to attack your opponent's mana while developing your own is a really effective way of taking over the board, especially when I'm playing such a slow deck. It's really helpful for allowing me to get my pieces set up. Now, I do think it probably would have been more correct to play something like either Mishra's Workshop or Tolarian Academy in place of Balance and Gifts Ungiven, but I wanted to play Balance, and Gifts Ungiven being an extra way to top deck a win was pretty impactful. Sadly, your points are going to be a lot more constrained after tonight when the new points announcement comes out. So this deck might not be quite so viable after 7 o'clock. That said, there's definitely ways to alter the deck around it. Breach does not need to be your win condition, and it's easily the biggest point sink that I have in the deck. So if you can take that out, get some other stuff in like a Kappa Cannoneer or Ugin, Eldrazi, whatever you want to do, that's a great way to go. This was just a silly idea that happened to be surprisingly effective. But that's all for this week, so if there's any goofy decks you want me to try out, or just things you want to let me know, hit me up in the comments, and come say hi when I stream at 6 o'clock this Wednesday. Until I see you then, good luck, have fun, and may the best wizard win.